very small, right? What are aspirations? So I look at what the child's goals are. Not that I don't want to know what your goals are too. It's just that they feel that they're being heard. What are their interests? Because you can create any type of programming based on their interests. So I see a lot of kids that are on the spectrum. I can figure out what their interest is and move everything into that interest, right? Or if they're really struggling with dyslexia and I can figure out a way to help them read through their interest, you're in, right? And they have your attention. So what are their interests? On the flip side, if I see somebody that doesn't have goals for themselves or they don't have an interest, that's a red flag for me. How do I help them with that? Right? Because then that's trying to say, like, you're not feeling really good about yourself, right? Because we all have interests. So how do you help them find those? So I look at that as like the inside part, right? And then you have nutrition, because nutrition plays a humongous role, especially with executive functioning, autism, ADHD. There's huge science behind what nutrition can do. I'm sure you all know about that. Exercise and sleep. And so you look at the health part of it, because if your body's not functioning correctly, how's your brain supposed to do that, right? And so this system connects together. About that tonight, but you just said, like the acronym, I want to give you a little context. Okay, so first one, you guys, what do you think executive functions? It's a hot word. That word didn't even exist. I started researching and learning about executive functioning when my middle daughter, she's autistic, she would come home with us and her backpack was spilling, books shoved at the bottom of the bag. I'm like, oh, did you pass in your homework? Or, she'd walk and mittens falling everywhere. And I was like, okay, like we gotta figure out some tools around this. And then she's 15 now, but I mean, even 10 years ago, executive functioning wasn't something that was around, right? Like, so I'm kind of asking you, what do you think executive functioning means? Yeah.
Like self-regulation.
Yeah, self-regulation.
Part
of it. You're absolutely right. Part of it is self-regulation. Go ahead.
Being able to function in daily life.
Being able to function in daily life. To whose level? The person or the people around you?
Both.
Because executive functioning skills, right, for kids, right, it causes a lot of stress on them, but it also causes a lot of stress on the parents, right? How many times do they forget their music instruments or their sporting equipment or my water bottle? How many times do you need to replace your lunchbox? Things like that, right? So executive functioning, yeah, emotional regulation, how you function in life, you need these skills. Have you ever sat back and thought, why is it more of an issue now than in the past? Anybody know? Because we taught these skills. So I'm not that old, so I know that many of you are still in the same age range as me. When you had to go to the library, you had to pull out the card, you had to find the Dewey Decimal System, right? When you had to learn how to spell, looking in the dictionary, right? You had to do alphabetical order. You didn't have a cell phone that you could say, hey, Siri, could you call my husband, right? You had to remember your phone numbers. It's so sad that I'm like, call Kelsey. That's my daughter. If she asked me what her phone number was, I wouldn't know. I'd have to look in my phone. But before you would need to remember your friend's phone numbers, right? You got a little piece of paper. Hey, give me your number, right? And you'd have to put it in your pocket and then actually dial it. Like, so these were skills that we had to use. Our brains had to do that. And because of the technology world, don't get me wrong, technology has its place for sure. And it's beautiful, but also has taken away for our kids the ability to utilize those executive functioning skills. So that's why it's kind of like this hot term, because we also in society as parents, we do everything for our kids, right? Back in the 80s or before, your parents were like, oh, get your butt outside all day, right? I'll ring the bell when it's time for lunch or dinner, right? We were outside more, we were using our bodies more, and we don't do that today. It's video games or electronic devices or things like that. So it's changed the neurons in our head. All right, so executive functioning, your brain is like traffic, right? So everybody, if you haven't been on a plane, I assume many of you have, when you take off in a plane, that control pilot, right, who is in the box above in the airway saying like, okay, you can take off, you can land, right? So an air traffic controller makes sure that everything runs nice and smoothly. Well, our brains do the same thing. And when you are lagging in some of those executive functioning skills, it doesn't fire the same way. So if it's not firing the same way, you're going to have times where things collide. You're going to have those big emotional outbursts. You're going to have times where you can't plan or prioritize things. Or for some of my high school kids, thinking about the bigger picture, especially this generation, they can't think big picture because life has been really hard for some of these guys with COVID, with the intense academics that they have. You sit back and you say, okay, well, what do you want to do? Or what's your hopes and dreams? Or looking back at that metacognition, they can't because it's so hard for them. Now, there are a very few in between that are like going to med school. Great. Okay, you know how to test take? You know how to plan and prioritize? So sometimes those dreams are so big and those executive functioning skills are not strong enough, and that's what you don't want to see happen. So here are the 12 areas. So we have response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, task initiation, sustained attention, planning and prioritizing, organization, time management, flexibility, metacognition, goal directed, and stress tolerance. I'm just going to say right now, stress tolerance, we all live in a society where stress is like, right? Okay, so I can guarantee you that in this room, one of us has one of these things. We probably all together have multiple of these things, right? Because stress is just in general. If you can manage stress in a healthy way, kudos to you, right? Time management, organization, that flexibility, right? Sometimes that's pretty hard as a mom to be that flexible thinker, like more with my husband than with my children, right? I always feel bad, right? Like for my husband, I'm like, no, we're doing it this way. This is what the schedule says. Do not veer from the schedule, right? So having flexibility can sometimes be hard. It's hard for kids all the time. So we're going to talk about these ones. Any of these stick out to any of you specifically for your child? Because if it does, I really want to spend some good time on this. All of them? All of them. Okay. All of them. All right, I'm going to work fast then. So response inhibition. This is how a child responds to anything, right? So this could be, does your child respond well playing with friends, right? You're on the playground and maybe they get bumped. How do they respond to situations? Is it over the top, right? Or is it maybe they don't respond at all? Or no, they're okay. And some of this stuff is when you're 5, you can have big emotions. You're allowed to do that, right? When you're 18 and you don't get what you want for dinner, that really is that the right response, right? Or something that is kind of family. You're talking about things at home and they're really feeling like they're not being heard. How do they respond? So here's some of the things. Being able to think before acting, right? That aggression sometimes comes out, especially for our younger kids when they're really overstimulated. Autism sometimes does have more aggression. ADHD, you see that a lot with kids because they can't control their body, right? So those outbursts happen more. So ways to improve some of those. Take a break when you feel frustrated. That's so easy to say, right? When you say to a kid, okay, like, why don't you just take a break? Well, no, I can't just take a break and walk away. They just broke my Lego set, right? Or I didn't get the book I wanted, or what have you, right? So taking a break is wonderful to say, but how do you do that? right? Those are those baby steps that I'm going to talk to you later about on how to really support that. It's easier said than done. Especially if you work with the population that I do, taking a break is wonderful when their intellectual ability can get to that point. Review directions before working. If you say at home, like, you need to do this and this before bed, make sure you're reminding them, right? Have a visual somewhere. So really setting up success for them so those responses to situations don't become so overwhelming to them. Counting in their heads. I love watching my little ones because you'll talk, say to count, and I'm like, okay, now feel your belly in and out, right? And you see them like trying really hard to like do that. It's adorable, but it does work. It's really helping that parasympathetic nervous system to calm down. Okay, working memory. I love this one. Yes.
We have a question. Isn't it also true that executive function issues such as ADHD can be present independent of modern changes, issues such as screen time, lack of attention, etc.?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good point. Yep. Working memory there's different forms of working memory, and a lot of people think like working memory is that time where you are applying things or skills to something that you've already learned, right? So working memory is really trying to remember, right? And it's pulling things from different files in the brain. That can be really hard if your processing speed is slower. So with executive functioning, a lot of times you have either gifted kids with slower processing speed, right? You have ADHD, right? And that's hard in itself because just organizing thoughts and breaking things down. So working memory works in a few ways. So it's using information to help memory tasks. I know, like in a math problem, can I remember how my teacher taught me how to do this, right? Okay, I'm stuck. I can't remember how to do that. So what are tools to help kids with working memory? This is a big problem for a lot of students and for adults too. So it's really drawing on those past experiences. This will go back to Baines. Sleep is key to your working memory. Your brain needs to charge itself at night. It needs to be able to take everything they've learned all day and regurgitate it, recharge, and really have that time for your brain to be ready for the next day. When kids don't have a good sleep cycle, their working memory is lower. Ways to help: highlighting, taking notes, really finding some good study skills, right? Or in this school, we don't do homework. So teaching them within the day, how do you use that working memory? How are you building on those skills? And sometimes it takes a really long time, but in the end, they have a more positive result. Emotional control, the ability to manage emotions. Just a raise of hands, does anyone in this room have any kids that are on the spectrum in any way? Yeah, okay. So okay. So those kiddos are big feelers. They feel so deep, so it's harder for them to control those emotions. And it's not their fault. They see the world in such an amazing different way than people that don't have autism or dyslexia. They think outside the box, but they feel so deep that it's harder for them to have that emotional control. So there's ways to work on that for sure. Looking at them, going back to how's your body feeling right now? Where is that coming from? Giving them the language to put with the emotion, right? And that really helps them use the language versus overextending. And sometimes those types of kids do cry more often than others. And it's not because they can't control it. It's just that's a natural reaction to the way that their brain works. Task initiation, breaking things down. A lot of parents come in and they're like, oh, my kid's just not motivated. And I'm like, well, it might not be about not being motivated. It could be more about the task is so daunting, they don't know how to break it down. So our youngest has a really hard time with cleaning her room. Anyone in here have a kid that is really bad at cleaning their room? Mm-hmm. So we started this process of, okay, her name's Kira. Kira, go put all your books away and then come see me. Pick up all your dirty clothes off the floor and then come see me. And when she breaks it down like that, she's able to conquer that task versus if I say, Kira, you need to go clean your room. I'm going to go upstairs and she's going to be sitting on the floor playing with her Legos and her feet in the air or doing whatever she's doing, right? And I'll be like, how's that room coming? Or the other part is she'll hear me coming up the stairs and just shove, right, everything under the bed, right? And so, you know, it's not clean, right? So breaking those tasks down even smaller. And it might seem like a pain in the tushy at first, but they're going to gain those skills, right? But visually, task initiation, it's so much, and they don't even know where to start, right? And it happens with homework, it happens at home with, you know what? I don't know if any of you have new drivers in the house, but we have someone that's learning to drive, and setting up drive time, right? It's the task initiation. I'm not going to seek you out, but you know you need your 70 hours of driving. How do we set that up, right? So you have to think about how you're breaking down these tasks. Sustained attention. So this one is hard. It's not because they don't want to focus. It is because there's so much stimulation going on around them that it makes it hard. And so noise canceling headphones, a quiet place for them to be. If you have kids that have phones, make sure that they're put away. Like, okay, from this time to this time, you don't have your phone with you. If you want to listen to music, turn on your Alexa or whatever you guys have. Planning and prioritizing. If you have kids in here that have dyslexia, planning and prioritizing is probably one of the hardest tasks for them. It is in writing. It is in language. Our world is all language-based, right? Majority of it. The way we communicate with each other, the way we build relationships. But when you have to plan and prioritize what you're thinking and write it down on paper, it is so incredibly hard for them. And this is that one area in executive functioning. If there's ways to support them at school or at home, chunking things up, really defining and breaking it down to the simplest form. So planning, today you're just going to write your title. Tomorrow we're going to talk about 2 things you want to focus on and really breaking down that planning piece for them. I'm going to try to go faster because I only have another half hour. All right, organization. Binders are fine, right? If they know how to use them. Right? Folders are fine, right? Teachers are like, here's your folder, make sure your take-home folder, right? Well, that's great. My kid took that take-home folder and shoved it in the bottom of the backpack, and I never got anything was there, right? Oh, did you sign that permission slip? No, didn't even see it, right? So find an organizational system that works, right? So I have kids that are completely electronic. They use Notion. That's their organizational system. I am somebody that needs the old-fashioned handwriting planner. I'm loving the lady that's sitting right here that's writing right now because that would be what I was doing, right? So I have my calendar. My husband and family, we live by the Google Calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen. So I have to transcribe everything, right? That's what works for me. Color coding works for one of my other kids. So finding what works versus saying, this is what works for me, you're going to try that because it might not work for your kid and then it's going to fail. Time management. So that's such a hard topic because you, for so long, manage your kids' time. And then we get to this age and they have to now all of a sudden be expected to know how to manage their time. We don't prep them through the ages, even in school, on how to manage their time. So they have this idea, oh, I can get my homework done and then I can go to Johnny's house, right? Well, that homework might take 2.5 hours. Or I need to get to my appointment, right? And my high school kids are always fashionably late, right? The moment they get their license, they come in late for school, late for their appointments because they haven't learned how to manage their time, right? And that is a really big thing for a life skill for adults. And we have many adults that, oh, if I'm 5 minutes late, I'm just fashionably late, right? And then you have the flip side who, for me, I'm always like 10 minutes early because God forbid I'm late, right? Flexibility for my kiddos that are on the spectrum, that is a really hard thing to do because it creates control. If a kid is in control, they know that they don't have to feel anxious. They know what to expect, right? But when they have to be flexible, that's making them vulnerable, right? That's making them vulnerable with their peers and with you. And that's putting them in a place where they're not sure what to expect. And so for some of those black and white thinkers, this is really hard. There's many ways to support flexibility, but that's a whole nother topic that we don't have time to talk about tonight. Metacognition, that's looking at things from a bird's eye view. Can they reflect on themselves? I did this action and it really hurt my friend, or I really wanted to make this card for somebody to make them feel better. Can they sit back and see the bigger picture? Or for my high school kids, when I'm taking classes in high school and I really don't want to put that time in, is it going to affect me on when I apply for college? Or what is, when I graduate, what is my plan, right? Even if you don't want to go to college, okay, that's fine, but what's your plan, right? And that's a very daunting thing. This is a part of the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is not fully developed until mid-20s, right? So this is an area where it is very hard to have full control over this. Goal directed. We work on SMART goals in here every week. And what is the goal? And some of them are, I'm gonna write an essay, and that's their SMART goal for the year, right? Or I'm going to pass in all my homework this quarter, right? Whatever that is, they have a goal that's for them. And if every human should have a goal because we're always growing, right? You never stop growing. We always should be making goals for ourselves to self-improve. And so when someone doesn't have this, I want to know why, right? And are they anxious? Are they unsure? Do they just need somebody to help process with some of that? And so that's something to really look at if you do have older kids in this room. Stress tolerance. We live in a very stressful environment. This is the highest one that every assessment I do for executive functioning, this one always comes up. Even with the best support at home, like it's just, we expect our expectations. We live in a busy society, right? There's always something. And so it can be social stress, environment stress, stress that they put on themselves, self-expectations. So this is an area that I spend a lot of time focusing on with my kids in my private practice and with my own family, because this has such an effect on the body. Okay, what is age-appropriate skills? 5 to 12. We break this up so that from 5 to 12, can they follow simple checklists? So when you say, I need you to go brush your teeth and put your pajamas on, can they do that? It doesn't need to be a physical checklist, but can they follow 2-step directions? Can they organize and sequence stories? This is a big span because at the age of 5, you're learning to read. Okay, so our friends that are dyslexic, they're learning to read. By the age of about 8 or 9, they're now starting to need to read to learn, right? And by the time they're 12, if they're not reading at a sufficient confident level, they're missing a lot of content. So this is that part of executive function, planning and prioritizing. It's that planning and prioritizing in your brain, not necessarily on paper or organizing. Are they able to follow a planned set of steps? Can they follow direction? Can they do Legos, right? Legos is a planned, you do this and you do this, right? Or if you're working, cooking at home, can they look at a recipe and say, oh, mommy or daddy, you got to do this, this, and this. By the age of 10, I would think that some of those Legos builders in the room, or learning to draw, or things like that, that they're able to do some of those things. Beginning to manage leisure time. Anybody have really littles in here? No, okay. Well, you remembered them when they were very little, right? And they needed lots of your time, right? And you were like, okay, I'm just gonna go to the bathroom alone for just a few minutes, right? And you sit in there just for an extra few minutes, so they're not like, right? And then you open the door and they're standing right there. You're like, yeah, okay, right, we're on. So can now they are they able to sit and manage their time alone, or and if they're not, how come? Because they should be able to have that independent time and feel okay being alone themselves. Following rules and social norms, do they know right from wrong? By fifth grade, I mean, by the age of 5, and they're going off to kindergarten, they're still learning some of those things. But some of those preschool times, those are really looking at what are those social rules, being a good friend, right? You guys will have access to some of these during time, kind of knowing the sense of time, like, oh, is it almost time for bed, or do I need to get ready for school, right? Like sense of time starts to develop on like what it looks like. Oh, I think I made too much information tonight. Teenagers may engage in self-talk to help them manage. So when you get to be a teenager, can you talk your stuff? Can you really think like, oh, my friend was a pain in the butt today, but yeah, all right, we're good, right? Can you walk through some of those things? Can they also seek out help from you, saying to like, hey, mom, I had a really hard day today. I just need to talk to you about this, right? Versus stuffing all of those emotions. And are they able to complete tasks and maybe not sit, but are they able to complete a task for almost an hour, right? Because we're thinking about this time, high school classes range from 45 minutes to 90 minutes. So can they sit and engage in that time? I don't know about you, but I have a very hard time sitting for 90 minutes. That might be one of my executive functioning skills that I need to work on. Follows in the complex school schedule. I have some kiddos where I don't even know how they end up understanding the schedule that they need. Like the high school schedule, blue, white. You might see me for 3 days and then you don't see me. Like, oh, we had a snow day, so now the schedule flips around. That is complicated. It's not just like you come to school and here's your classes. So that's a very important skill to have. And I see why they do it, because as you get into the bigger corporate world, schedules are moving all the time. You need to move things. So it is a life skill. So how to foster independence. This is something that I think many of you are trying to figure out, like, how do I help my child feel more successful and more independent, right? And your ability to step back just a little bit. So breaking down tasks, that goes back to, okay, you need to go to work today, so make sure you feed the dog and leave on time and make sure that you communicate with me, right? Or here's your homework for the week. How you have 4 midterms. How are you going to study for these? Helping them figure that out. Visual aids. I don't mean like you stick visual aids around your house, but for my 11-year-old, when COVID was here, we had on our door before she walked out the door, do you have your mask? Do you have your backpack? Do you have your water bottle? And do you have a jacket on, right? At her eye level. So sometimes you do have to have those for kids. And it's just that visual reminder, oh man, I just gotta look. They might not even read it, but at least it's there. I won't go through every single one of these. One that sticks out to me is provide choices. I love choices, but at the same time, if I ask I'll use my 11-year-old again, do you want grapes, bananas, or oranges? She's gonna look at me like deer in the headlights, because I just gave her 3 choices. 2 choices. Do you want apples or do you want grapes, right? If you give a kid too many choices, they have no idea how to process that. And we live in a world in parenting that my husband helped me with this, because I was like, well, they should have a choice, right? No, parents need to guide, right? These are healthy choices. We have some of us that, train our kids to pack their own lunches. I did really well with that for my first 2, not so well with the youngest. But you taught them how to make choices, right? You know what's healthy food in your lunchbox. Now pick your carb, your treat, and all the fruits and veggies and everything else you need. So helping with that. And then also modeling. You've got, we're models, right? All of what our kids learn is from us modeling and the people around them. So if you're modeling healthy habits, they're going to take after that. Or you can also use it as an example. Do you see that mom really has to break down my stuff so I know what is expected of me this week? Do you see how I'm planning out? I'm using me on Sunday what I need to feed you all for the week. I'm going to be really late and busy this week. So really kind of modeling some of those behaviors. Supporting emotional regulation. This is a whole topic in itself, but emotional regulation I see a lot with every kid that comes into my practice, especially, is that they don't know how to express themselves. And they hold everything into every cell in their body, and then they get to you, and it's the icing on the cake, and they're this big wet noodle of puddle, right? And you're like, what? Like, what's up? Right? And they can't even verbally tell you what's going on because it's something that might have happened halfway in the middle of the day. So mindfulness, create an emotional space of the environment, bedtime. That time when you're tucking your kid in and they might be tired, cozy up with them. Say like, hey, what was your high and what was your low today? All right, well, you want to talk about your low or do you want to wait and talk about it later, right? Those small moments, I have a 45-minute drive. I spend a lot of time talking to my kids because they're in there. Rule is one AirPod. And if I'm talking, you need to engage with me. So that's my time where I get my high school kids. So find that time, right, in your day where there's no distraction and just talk to them. Because then you're going to get more from it and you're present. My device goes off all the time. I'm a busy woman. And I hate it when my child is asking me something and I have something I have to answer on my phone. And so I do this. I want to be present for you. Can you give me a moment? Because we are not present enough because of how busy we are. Enhancing focus and attention. Establish a distraction-free environment. We actually cannot, is it even possible, right? I love my teachers because they started this thing called the Zen 10, right? And I was like, what's a Zen 10? And so I was in the car last night driving home with one of my kids, and they were like, she's a junior. She's like, I love Zen 10, right? Because we don't have a distraction-free environment because we have devices with us at all times. Those things go off constantly. So it's not a distracted-free environment. Find time for that. Break down tasks into smaller segments. We talked about that. Right? That planning, prioritizing. Positive reinforcement. We're always quick as a society to tell you, you didn't do that right. You're not good enough. You haven't finished that task. Oh, you only got a B? Well, did you not study hard enough, right? We live in an environment where we're more apt to focus on the negative versus the positive. Wow, you worked really hard on that. That's okay that you only wrote a sentence and a half. Look how much time you spent on doing that. You should be proud of yourself, right? Or they're able to calm themselves down quicker than they used to in the past. Acknowledge the positives because then they create that cycle. They want that from you versus focus on the negative. And it's really hard when those behaviors are like soul challenging, right? And if you can just pick one positive every day to say to your kid, it makes a huge difference because I'm sure there's a lot of negatives that you can look at. Okay, strategies for home. This is for you, parents. Establish routines. Routines are key, especially bedtime routine. I can't stress that enough. A bedtime routine is key for the brain, cognitive development, stress, emotional regulation. If you have a schedule, it creates formality. They know what to expect, right? Using visual supports, I kind of talked to you about that, where it's needed, right? If you have really young ones at home, those could be helpful. If you have your teenager at home, big stop sign. Did you take out the trash, right? Or did you walk the dog today, right? Do not leave until you do X, Y, and Z. Because I know we have 4 kids. Hey, can you wash the dishes today, right? And I have one that says she doesn't see the text messages, right? So then it creates this little bit of tension, right? Versus making sure they see it. And then modeling executive functioning skills. Most families that have a child that has executive functioning difficulties, they got it from somewhere. Okay, there is some gene and components in here. I look at my kids and I'm like, I work at this every day. I know where you got it from, right? Like, so you can't remove yourself, all right? So if you're making your child work on executive functioning, make sure you're working on it too. Do it as a team. Say like, I need to work on this, and you have these things you need to work on. Let's partner up. Let's talk about it, right? Yeah, it was really hard. I forgot to set my alarm this morning. I was late for work. This is what I'm going to do different. How did that writing assignment go for you today, right? Make it a collaboration versus this negative thing. So I have 10 minutes left of your time to talk to you guys about beans. I'm going to talk to you about that, and then I will give you guys time to ask me a question. So the Bing system, it is the new, I hope, approach to education. We have a new type of generation coming up in our society. And we really, if you look at the brain and the body connection, the Bing system meets everybody's needs, right? So if you look at behavior, aspirations, interests, exercise, nutrition, and sleep, when you think about all of those, they affect every facet of your life, right? You don't eat well. I don't know about you, but I can get pretty hangry when I haven't eaten. You have a kid that can't verbally tell you that they're hungry, and you look at them and they're like a hot mess. Hey, did you eat today? Or just pull a snack out of your pocket. I don't know about you, but I had that with my kids on chairlifts. Sleep. If I'm tired, man, am I cranky, or I don't respond enough. I see that smile. Two of my team is back there for me tonight. Exercise, increase endorphins, right? So you have those kids that feel super stressed out. They go and work out, or they go for a walk, go in the woods. They instantly feel happy. I work with a couple kids that if I take them outside and let them be outside for a good half hour before we do work, it's amazing. I worked at a school out on Shabby Island, and I couldn't believe they had 45-minute recess in the morning, and then they had an hour recess in the afternoon. Those kids got all their work done. I never saw one kid not be able to focus, right? It blew my mind. And they don't have that much recess anymore, I don't think, because they realized how much time was not being focused on academics. But there were kids there that had ADHD. You would have never known, because moving your body had such a huge effect. We have kids in the school that can move their body as much as they want. So this approach provides a 360-degree view of the whole child, ensuring balanced development in their internal well-being and external motivation. So it focuses on the internal and external. I don't know if any of you have kids in here that have IEPs, just show of hands. Yeah. An IEP does not look at that. You make assumptions of what you think is going to work, right? But do you ever take into consideration, how are they feeling? Have they slept? Are they tired? Do they just need a few extra moments to sleep in the morning? How fast are they eating in school? They have 15 minutes, right? Have they even asked the child what their goals are? We build an IEP based on what we think is most important, not what is actually important. If you looked at children in this lens, you would have a profound difference in self-esteem, motivation, the act of maybe actually liking to learn. I I can't say how many kids I see in my practice that hate school. You're life learners. How can you hate learning? We're doing a huge deficit. And this process enables us to look at all those pieces. So the whole process of Bain system is to integrate framework. So we have assessments that look at all these areas and build personalized strategies on how to help them. All right, so I look at behavior. Johnny is having full-on outbursts during transitions. All right, well, what's going on during those transition times? Is there too many transitions within the day? Is there something that we can do to help with those transitions, right? And those are things that you can look at. Is the hardest transition in the morning or in the afternoon? Are they going home and having a harder transition home because they've kept it in all day? So really digging into some of those pieces, right? And designing a meticulous program just for them. Right? And I think if we spend more time looking at the whole body and the whole child, we wouldn't need it. It's just my own soapbox, sorry. The evaluation of Bain's for executive functioning. It enhances focus and attention. Goes into that sleep, nutrition, right? If you aren't sleeping and you aren't eating, really hard to stay focused, right? Are you having a lot of stress at home, right? That stress tolerance. If you are studying for midterms, or you gotta go for some other type of test, or you're failing your grades, whatever it is, right? You're not gonna sleep. You're gonna be wide awake, right? So how do you work on those skills? Strengthen organization and time management. That goes back to looking at those behaviors, but also what's your aspirations? What do you want to do? Let me help you figure that out, right? And your interests, okay, you're not sure? Well, let's see, your aspirations might help us figure out what you're interested in. I had a client sit with me the other day and they're like, I'm interested in so many things. I have no idea what direction to go to. All right, that's something I can work with. Improve emotional regulation and self-esteem. That goes back into how's your body feeling? You exercising? That endorphins, right? That serotonin level goes right up, right? I don't know about you, but I used to be a runner, can't run anymore, but I would go for those long runs. My husband would leave a little water bottle in my mailbox because I would do 10-mile run. I would feel on like a high, right? And I might have been so angry, right? Frustrated, right? And you come back and you feel really good. So what are these kids doing? Are they not moving their bodies enough here? So effective coping mechanisms to stress. If you don't teach your kid how to cope with stress, how are they supposed to cope with stress? Look at yourself. How do you cope with stress? You're mirroring that to them, right? You're mirroring that. And it's not your fault. I do the same thing. But how do you help your child cope with stress? Because they have it. They also have it because they watch you and they love you, right? So making sure that you know how to help with that. And the Bain system does that. We look at the whole child, the whole family, right? Because it's all interconnected. Identifying and utilizing strengths. We live in a society where we just look at the negatives. Every one of your kids has strengths, probably more strengths than weaknesses. It's how you look at it, but they also have to feel and know that they have strengths. We are really quick on pointing out, man, you didn't do that, right? Or I'm not a good reader. School's just hard for me, right? Okay, well, you are probably might be amazing at building Legos. I stink at building Legos, but I just watched my daughter build a 1,000-piece set of Legos, and I'm fascinated on how she did that, right? That's a strength. So really, really pointing those out for them. And then enhancing problem-solving skills, improving decision-making and planning. That goes back to that whole system. If your body isn't in alignment, if your brain and body are not connected, how do you function properly, right? I'm huge on boosting my kids' confidence, right? They work so hard at just being kids. And then they get to be adults, and as an adult, you work even harder, right? So making sure they feel confident. It breaks my heart how many kids I see in my office that come in and their self-esteem is so low. So low. Because if you have an IP, you know how much testing goes on, right? You know how many times they've been pulled out of the classroom. They know that they're different than their peers. That affects their self-esteem right at the beginning, right? And that momentum builds and builds and builds. I'm not a good reader. I have dyslexia, right? Now I'm labeled with something, right? All of these things just kind of deplete that, right? So finding things that boost their confidence. School might be hard, but you're an amazing athlete, right? School might be hard, but look what you can do with animals, right? Or finding ways within the school day to build their confidence. Let them teach something. I learned a ton from my students, so much. And then the last is how to improve your executive functioning skills with beans. Healthy foods, sleep routine, I cannot mention that enough. Breaking tasks down, set daily and weekly goals. It goes back to that SMART goal. SMART goals are important. Weekly goals. Don't wait until New Year's resolution, right? How many of us, like 2 weeks later, oh, I've already broken, had my glass of wine, right? So you sit back and you're like, I'll start next year, right? So weekly goals. All right, this week I'm going to take Brutus, my dog, for an extra walk because he really needs it. He's been putting on a little bit of weight, right? Something small like that, right? 2, I am going to build these skills so in a year from now, I can do whatever that is, right? Just start small. Start small and the momentum just keeps coming. Making time for relaxation. I don't know about you, but that is so hard for me. So hard for me. So I have started to do art on Saturdays. I do art at the table with my kids, and I might only do it for an hour, but it's my 1 hour of relaxation, right? Trying to find time where you don't have to think about work. You don't have to think about all the things that are going on with your kids, your husband, your family, right? It's just time to just be focusing on you, whatever that is. I did it at 7. Were you timing me? So I would love questions and answers. This half hour is all for you. I went really fast. This, I could have gone into like a 3-hour talk on this. So please, what questions you got?